Hey guys, thanks for joining Learn to Play. My name is Lance, and today we're going to take a look at Abyss. This is a 2 to 4 player game that takes roughly 45 minutes to an hour and a half to play. In it, the players are competing against each other to try to win the throne of the deep sea realm called Abyss. They do this by gathering cards of different factions that will allow them to purchase powerful lords, which in turn will allow them to gain control over powerful locations, which each of these things will allow them to gain influence points. And at the end of the game, the player with the most influence points will win the game. So let's head to the table and I'll teach you how to play. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is cover setup. So you're going to go ahead and shuffle your exploration deck and place it on the top of the board. Then you're going to go ahead and do the same with your lord deck. And you're going to go ahead and flip over the top 6 lords, and starting with moving towards the end. From there, you'll go ahead and put out your location deck and flip over the top location. Go ahead and put out your monster tokens and your monster threat token. Place out your keys at the top of the board so all players can reach them. Finally, each player will receive 1 shell and 1 pearl that they'll keep their pearls in. And from here, then you can go ahead and randomly determine the starting player. The way that I like to do it is grab an exploration card of a different color for each player that's playing, and then choose one and have the players draw, and when that player draws that particular color, then they're the first player to go. Alright, so during each player's turn, there's a sequence of events that must be followed. So at the beginning of a player's turn, the first thing they can do, which is optional, is called Plot at the Court, which if there are any slots opened in the Lord sets down here, they can choose to spend 1 pearl per slot to flip over a new lord. So let's say, for example, that these 2 spots were open. The first player could pay 1 pearl, and then he would flip over the first card and move it towards the ends of that set. He can keep doing this as long as there's open slots, and as long as he has pearls to spend. Alright, so after a player has decided whether or not they want to plot at the court, then they must perform 1 action during their turn. Out of these actions that they can select from are to explore the depths, request support from the council, or to recruit a lord. And we're going to go ahead and take a look at each one of those different actions now. Alright, so your exploration deck is made up of 71 cards. 65 of those cards are going to be the various ally cards, and there's 5 different factions with those allies. Each ally faction will have cards in the deck that are numbering from 1 to 5. And then you're also going to have 6 sea monster cards mixed in that deck as well to make up your exploration deck. So the first action we're going to look at is exploring the depths. And in order to explore the depths, you're going to flip over the top card from the exploration deck. If it's an ally, then starting with the player to your left and going to each player, you're going to offer them the opportunity to purchase this ally from you. If they choose to purchase it, then they will pay you pearls directly, or they can pass. If they choose to purchase, the cost in pearls will increase during your turn. The first person to purchase a card will cost 1 pearl. The second person to purchase a card will cost 2 pearls. And the third person to purchase a card will cost 3 pearls. The cost in pearls does not depend on the card that's the value of the card or the player that purchased or is purchasing the card. It's only dependent on the number of cards that are sold during the turn. Each player can only purchase 1 card from you during the turn, so once that player has purchased a card, they may not purchase any more during that turn. If it gets back to you and no players have purchased the card, then you have the choice of either taking that card into your hands or to continue exploring. If you continue to explore, you'll flip over the next card in the stack. If it's an ally, then again you would offer it to all the players. If it's a sea monster, which we have here, then you have 2 options. You can either attack the sea monster and automatically defeat it, and then you would receive the reward that's listed in the space. So at the first space, you'd either take a pearl or you take a sea monster card token, which will give you victory points at the end. Or you can choose to pass and continue exploring. If you pass the sea monster, you'll move the threat token down 1 space and then continue exploring. And again, if it's an ally, we would offer each player an option to buy, and then it would get back to you and you could choose to take it. If not, then keep going. If you make it to the last spot and no person has purchased that card, when it gets back to you, you must accept that last card into your hands, and then with it making it to the last space, then you also would gain a pearl to add to your stash. Once you've added an ally to your hands or fought a monster, your phase will come to an end. Any cards that are on the track will be flipped over and put into their respective stacks, face down. So red on red, green on green, and purple on purple. Any sea monsters that are out there will be put into a discard pile and reshuffled into an exploration deck as we need it. The threat token will stay in place unless you fight the monster, in which case then it would return to the topmost position, and then your turn would be over. Alright, so the second option for an action that you can perform during your turn is to request support from the council. When you do this, you would choose one stack without looking at it, and you would take all the cards in that stack and add them to your hands. And then your turn would be over. Alright, the Lord deck is comprised of lords from the 6 different guilds. You have the ambassadors, soldiers, farmers, politicians, mages, and merchants. On each Lord card, there's going to be different pieces of information. On the top corner of each Lord card, you're going to have that Lord's influence points, which will be gained at the end of the game for the player that controls that Lord. Some of the Lords will have keys, which will allow them to control locations, which we'll cover more in locations. All the Lords are going to have a cost in the faction that they're associated with, and then if they have bubbles, you have to spend additional factions, and we'll cover that more in buying Lords. And then some of the Lords will also have special abilities, which there's 2 different types. You have the special ability with an arrow, which means as soon as you purchase that Lord, you get to use that special ability one time when you purchase him. And then you have other Lords that don't have the arrow, which means that those abilities are semi-permanent and will stay with the players until that Lord takes control over a location, which we'll cover more in locations. Alright, so the last option as an action that we can perform during our turn is to recruit a Lord. And we are allowed to recruit one Lord for this action. When we do, we would choose one Lord from the field, and we have to pay the Lord's cost at the bottom in our allies that we have in our hand. In order to do this, we have to spend a number of ally cards based on the requirements that we must meet. So with this, it shows a picture of a jellyfish, so one of our ally cards must be a jellyfish. And then for each bubble that is shown above that, we have to spend one card in a different ally faction. So if we look at the cards that we have in our hands, we have 2 seashell cards, one's a 5 and one's a 1. We have 1 jellyfish card that's a 3, a 2 of a seahorse, and a 1 of crab. So we have to spend the jellyfish to meet the requirements of this one here. And then we must spend 1 card from 2 different factions to meet that requirement. So we could spend the crab for 1, and we could do the seahorse for 2, which would give us a total of 6 points, which is what we need to purchase this Lord. Or the other option we have is that we could spend the 1 from the seashell, which would meet our requirements for our 3 different factions. It wouldn't meet the requirement for the number, and anytime we want to, if we don't have enough, we can spend 1 pearl to make up the costs for each point that we're missing. So as long as you have pearls, that's another option that you can use the pearls for. Once you have purchased the Lord, any allies that you spent to purchase that Lord will go to the discard pile, except for the one that's the lowest in that stack, which you'll get to keep and add to your affiliated allies, not back to your hand to buy more Lords. So in a situation where you have a tie, you get to choose which one you want to keep. So we'll say we'll keep the crab. Like I said, he goes off to the side. He will not be added back to your hands. And at the end of the game, you're going to get points for the allies you have off to the side. The Lord will get added to your side as well. And like I said, if you have an arrow on the bottom of the card like this one here, you would immediately get what is required on the bottom. Otherwise, with the ones that don't have it, it's a semi-permanent. It'll stay in play until that Lord is used to purchase a location, which we'll cover in just a minute. Any allies that you didn't spend would go back and stay in your hand. And once you've purchased that Lord, then all the other Lords will get moved over. If at that point you're down to 2 Lords, so if you've purchased the 3rd Lord, then you would receive 2 pearls. and then you would refill all the Lord slots that are open. Alright, so with the locations, they have 3 pieces of information on them. They have location's name, the amount of points, and the ways that that location will grant you influence points at the end of the game. And then each one will have a symbol, and there's 3 different types of symbols. You have the trident, which will go for lords, the star, which will go for allies, and the keys, which there's only 2 of them in the entire deck, and they will give you a special ability on their own. On top of that, each location will have a color that's it's affiliated with. So, for example, with this one being purple, it will be attached to the Politician Guild. And with this one being red, it will be attached to the Soldier Guild. Alright, so now we're going to talk about purchasing a location. So during your turn, when you choose to purchase a lord, so let's say during our turn we're going to go ahead and purchase this lord here. He costs 7 points, and they're all jelly, so we'll spend our jelly there. We'll get to keep the lowest card, and then we add him to our pile. And now that we have 3 keys, we must purchase a location. So we have 2 options. We can either take one location that's already face up, which right now we only have the 1, or we can choose to draw out of the stack a number of locations. We can take 1, 2, 3, or 4 locations from the stack. So let's go ahead and look at that. And so we have 4, and we can go ahead and look at those and choose one of them that we wish to purchase. When we purchase it, we'll put it off to the side and cover up the lords that are purchasing it for a total of 3 keys. Once those lords are attached to a location, their special abilities will no longer work and will be turned off immediately. So any effects that they have on other players, those will go away. Any locations that you didn't choose will go into the playing area so that other players will have more options during their turn when they want to pick a location. So the more locations you look at gives you a better option, but it also gives other players more options during their turn. So the other thing with locations I'd like to touch on real quick are the ambassadors. Ambassadors have 3 keys, and usually will have a special ability on the bottom that will tell you how many locations to draw and what to do with them. But whenever you purchase an ambassador that has 3 keys, you will automatically get a location during that turn as well. And he will be the only one that will control that location. Alright, so once you've performed your 1 action during your turn, then your turn will be over and play will pass to the player to your left. This will continue until one of the endgame conditions is met. The first one is when a player has recruited their 7th lord, and the second one is when a player has purchased a lord and the lord's fields are required to be refilled, and there's not enough lords in the stack to refill the complete set of 6 lords. When either one of these conditions is met, then the players would complete the turn that they're on so that all players have had an equal number of turns, and then they would move into the final scoring phase to determine the winner of the game. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at final scoring. So before we do that, the last thing you're going to do is the cards that you still have in your hands, you're going to go through those and choose the lowest ally from each of the factions you have and place them with your affiliated allies. So we have any cards you have left over will be discarded. At this point, then you would go ahead and total up your points. So the first thing we're going to do is you're going to get points for each of your locations. So we have 1, and it says that we get 2 victory points for each of your farmer lords. So we have 1, so we'll have 2 points there, plus 5 points for the location. So we have 7. After that, then we total up each one of our lords' points. So we have 5, 10, 14, and 6 for 20. So that puts us at 27. Then we look at the strongest affiliated ally from each of our races. So we got 1 point there for 28. We have 2 points here for 30. We have 2 points here for 32, because this one won't count. It's only the strongest. Then we have 3 points here for 35 and 2 more points for 37. Then we add up any monster tokens we have. So we picked up 3 points there, so that puts us at 40. And that is all we have. The keys will be discarded. They are not worth any points, and the only reason that you would keep the pearls is if for some reason two players tie for the amount of influence points that they have. The tiebreaker would be the pearls.